heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
Good morning, and thank you, Martha, for reading that for us. We're continuing our series right now as we're chasing after Christ, how we talked about once we get out of the water, once we put Christ on in baptism, that's just signing up for the marathon. That's not the end goal. That's just the beginning. And as we look through this Sermon on the Mount, we see how Jesus has set before his followers and soon-to-be followers what that route looks like, what it means, what it seems like, what to expect as you are chasing after Christ. We saw that he redefined what it meant to be blessed. That it's not just about power that you have, it's not just about material wealth or comfort that you have that defines you as blessed, that there's something deeper and richer of what actually means to be blessed. That true blessing is found only by those who trust in God, rather than the power structures and the values of this world that define success and wellness in it. We saw how Jesus immediately engaged his audience by not allowing them to be passive in receiving this message. Because first he identifies them, those in the crowd, those who are listening, first he defines them as being blessed by God, but then he lets them know that they were blessed for a purpose. That purpose wasn't just for their comfort, but it was to put those blessings into work. That God had value in them because he was going to use them for his good works. They were valued because they were intended to be useful for him in sharing this message of love, hope, and salvation with the world. He describes them as being just as valuable as salt and just as valuable as light. Two things that we talked about last week that is worthless unless you're putting it into action, putting it into use. Right after that, Jesus moves on into the meat of his message in Matthew chapter 5, 21 through 48. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is setting out a roadmap for his disciples. That if you want to follow him, this is the path to expect. These are the turns that you're going to need to make. These are the hills that you're going to have to climb. Behind me up here, this is my normal running route around my neighborhood. It's just over 5 kilometers. And I some of it's through neighborhoods. Most of it's to avoid a couple really big hills in my neighborhood. I just try to avoid those, even though after moving to Colorado, I learned that everywhere is uphill. It's like a weird Escher painting that there's no flat places. You're going to always gain altitude somehow. And still, even if you end up at the same place, you're going to gain altitude the whole way. But this is what I found to be the most comfortable for me. Jesus didn't necessarily do that whenever he was setting the route before us. He said, this is the route. And much like Colorado, a lot of it's uphill. A lot of it is going. There are no shortcuts. There are no unknown paths or surprises. To follow Jesus, you must throw away all that you know about the world, and you put on a new viewpoint of what the world is, a radical understanding within the teachings of Jesus that turns the world upside down. Seeing and understanding this shift is one thing. Understanding the shift of what Martha just read a second ago about being willing to give to those who ask of you, even more so than what they ask. Turning the other cheek. Those are things that understanding as a base concept of this being somewhat different, that's one thing. Accepting it as the new correct way, the new normal for your life is a completely different way. It's a different struggle all on of its own. But the real challenge is not just accepting that it's the new way that you should do things, but embracing it as the way you want it to be. To truly love this new upside-down world. Joyfully leaving behind your old ways. The old ways that made sense. The old ways that probably, even after putting on Christ, still make sense. But throwing those away and adopting a new mindset, a new worldview, one that is Christ's worldview in our daily lives. So what is this new upside-down worldview? Well, you got to remember who Jesus was talking to. Most of the people Jesus was talking to were just normal people. Just normal people. They weren't scholars. Most of them were not experts, just people. They had obligations and responsibilities that they needed to juggle just to get food on their table, let alone thinking about how to keep and stay in line with the covenant that their people had made with God so many years ago. They were focused on making sure that they were fed and that they were housed and that they were avoiding as much persecution from the Romans at the time as possible, while still trying to remain faithful to Mosaic law. If not just for their own faith, just to keep their status in society okay, avoiding just the looks of the Pharisees and even the persecution of the Pharisees and other religious leaders. So they're just trying to keep in step with what they're supposed to be doing. Now, some were actually, they were seeking out God out of religious zeal, absolutely. Some may be trying to just glean social power to wield it in hopes of growing in that power and influence in that community. But this is the group of people that Jesus is talking to, a large group of people from a variety of different outlooks. But most of them are just trying to get by. And in verse 20, Jesus gives them the first look at really how hard this path is going to be. The first hint that following him is not going to include an insignificant amount of effort. Yes, you are blessed. Yes, you are valuable. But if you thought that this lesson, that this Sermon on the Mount was just all about back pats and praise, you're in for a sore surprise. Because the standard of discipleship is high when it comes to Jesus. He says, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." To be right with God, you must make righteousness a priority, even more so than those who lord their own self-righteousness over you. That's what Jesus is saying here as he gets into the meat of his sermon. The first of which he points out in this new upside-down philosophy is how they should deal with anger and reconciliation. He says, hey, guess what? Not murdering somebody is too low of a bar to call yourself good. You can't expect to just be on the right side of the law because you're not taking out wrath and killing somebody. That's not good enough. Well over 2,000 years before Master Yoda, Jesus warned of the dangers of anger leading to hate and hate leading to suffering. That's literally what Jesus is saying here. You can't let hate be in your life. Jesus encourages his followers to seek out reconciliation instead. Whether that's to the one who has wronged you, or maybe you're the one who wronged them. You must seek out reconciliation. Don't let the conflict go beyond this incident. You must mend that relationship. Even more so than bringing your own offering to the altar. You must leave it. Go reconcile with your brother before you bring this offering to me, he says. God is in the reconciliation business, so how can you be a part of that business if you hate your brother? The next thing Jesus looks at is the purity of heart. He says, hey, guess what? Not committing adultery is too low of a bar to consider yourself right with God. It's good to keep your body in control and not feeding those immoral urges. It's even better to find a way to get that mind under control. Look but don't touch is not a healthy mindset for your relationship with your spouse, nor is it a healthy mindset for your relationship when it comes to your soul either. He says, remove from your life the things that draw you away from righteousness. That same righteousness you claim to pursue. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. For it is better to enter the kingdom of heaven not whole than to not enter the kingdom of heaven at all. Difficult teachings. But Jesus wanted to implore them about how important it was to guard your heart. Oh, I'm a little behind, sorry about that. How important it is to guard your heart. To act as ambassadors in the world, we must live in the world, and we can't avoid all contact with the world. You can't avoid contact with those who live outside of the purview and standards of Christ. You can't. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to be connected to that, in relationship with them, so that they can have a relationship with God through your influence. But we can take measures to intentionally guard ourselves when we're in those sensitive situations, to make real and practical decisions to prevent the exposure of sinfulness, to progress to collaboration with it. Jesus calls for a radical type of purity. Next, he calls to their attention, commitment, and integrity. He's telling the people, you need to take seriously the vows you make before God. First, he speaks about wedding vows and about how people were basically nullifying their marriages through writs of divorce over things that had not reached the level of should be divorce worthy. That people were making these decisions and not taking the vows they had seriously. Jesus says, don't get divorced unless there is sexual adultery, immorality as part of that. Because if you don't, then once you divorce them and they go out and they get remarried, guess what? You are forcing them to commit adultery again, as with the person that they are now married to. But it's not just about their marriages, and it's not just about simple legal proceedings that can be nullified by the right paperwork. Other liberties were being taken with business deals. People were making vows before God, swearing by God and His kingdom, swearing by the earth and heaven, to try to give credence and more value to their word. Jesus tells them that it's not just unnecessary to do that, it's wrong. You don't need to swear by any power or authority if you just live your life as one whose yes means yes and no means no. If people know you to be someone who stands by what they say, they're not going to need you to make promises that need some kind of special equity backing it up, because your integrity is doing that. Live a life in which your integrity isn't in question. Some of the most shocking worldview shifts that he calls for occur in the end of chapter 5. Jesus redefines the very notion of justice. In the ancient world, whenever he calls this, you have heard it say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I tell you. Now, in the ancient world, even to this day, that is often attributed to, it's called Hammurabi's Code. There's this really cool stele. You can kind of see it right there where it's this equitable justice. You hurt me, I hurt you back. You cause me financial pain, you have to pay for that. The Jewish people, when they heard that, they thought of Mosaic law, because it's there as well in Exodus chapter 21, 23 through 25, talking about this equitable justice. But then Jesus redefines the notion of justice. Instead of looking for ways to get your own revenge and get your own recompense, Jesus says, trust in the one who judges instead. Turn the other cheek, he says in Matthew chapter 5, 38 through 42. A radical call to non-retaliation. This is as audacious today as it was back then. We want our just deserts. We want revenge when people harm us. We want to avoid discomfort and pain. I know I do. I'm quite allergic to pain. It hurts every time it happens. But Jesus calls for a radical type of non-retaliation. Turning the other cheek, walking the extra mile, giving the coat as well as the shirt. All three were beyond the extent of what the enemy was allowed to demand or what was culturally appropriate to inflict at that time. At that time, a Roman soldier could force any citizen that was under Roman rule to carry their stuff for a mile, by law, while they're walking down the road. By law, if you sued somebody, you could take everything up to their shirt, but you couldn't take their cloak because that was a necessity of life for them to keep warm. Turning the other cheek, typically you slap with the right hand. The left hand was for, we'll call it private things. I don't know, it's dirty things. This was for cleanliness. You slap with the right hand. And if you slap with the right hand, you're going to hit the left cheek, right? So if you turn the other cheek, now they have a choice. They either slap with the left hand, which is culturally taboo, or you slap with the back hand, which is also culturally taboo. So Jesus is saying, give them more. Offer them more. Do not take your retaliation, but offer yourself up. Whether it's turning the cheek, walking that extra mile, or giving your cloak, showing submission that's not passive. It's not turning the other cheek because you can't stand anymore because you're beaten. You are choosing to allow them to have a chance to harm you more because you are choosing to not harm them back. Choosing not to escalate. Choosing to seek that moral high ground. This is tied to the most challenging teaching of all here in Matthew chapter 5. To love our enemy. Now, there was likely very little question in the crowd's mind whenever Jesus said your enemy, who he was talking about. Everyone had one main enemy in mind, and that was the Roman occupiers, those who had lorded their power over Israel for generations at this point. Who forced taxes out of them, who abused them physically, stole their property, did worse things. There was very little question that Jesus was mainly referring at this point to their enemy that was closest in their mind. Beyond just normal interpersonal conflicts with the neighbor down the road, Jesus was mostly pointing to their Roman oppressors. Now, I want you to imagine the reaction of a crowd. A crowd of people who have heard of this potential Messiah. This guy who's doing miracles that don't make sense, that he's speaking with authority, that making claims of being the Son of Man. A group of people who are looking and hungry for a Messiah to kick the enemy out of Israel. And now this guy who you had come out of town up on the mountainside to listen to, who had just spent a little bit of time telling you how valuable and blessed you are, now telling you to love the very people that you hate most in the world. The people that you expected him to be rallying the troops to go throw out of Israel. It's probably a pretty jarring situation. This wasn't a new Maccabean leader. This was something different, which is absolutely what Jesus was. He was something different. Here Jesus tells them that not only should they love their enemies, they should actively pray for them. It's long been said to keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And Jesus' teaching isn't that kind of thing. It's not Sun Tzu. It's not like Michael Corleone telling you need to keep your enemies close so you can keep an eye on them so that you can manipulate them. That's not what Jesus is talking about here. He's just saying that you need to love your enemies so that you can make them no longer your enemy. So they can transition out of that enmity to become a joint worker with you in the blessings of Jesus. Because God loves them too. Because as broken, as sinful as they are equally loved by God and need to have an opportunity to realize that. Of all the teachings, this was likely the hardest for the crowd to understand. Truly an upside down from what they were expecting to hear, again, from this potential Messiah. In the grand scheme of things, I think this remains to be one of, if not the most difficult teaching and direction that lies in this manifesto of Christ. So who's your enemy? Is it your neighbor? Maybe it's a coworker that takes your ideas and somehow gets, benefits from that. Maybe it's a boss who is benefiting from your ideas and not sharing the glory. Maybe it's something bigger than that. Whenever I think of my enemy list, it's not hard to think of who's the easiest person to be my enemy. Vladimir Putin's pretty high on my list right now. With the pain and the difficulty that he's brought to this world, the harm that he's caused, the audacious behavior. What does it mean for me to pray for him? Now, there's what I want that to be, and there's what that probably is. I'd be lying to you if I told you that I haven't prayed for his death. Because in my mind, that would benefit the world and it would benefit God's kingdom. But is that praying for him? I don't think so. That's hard. This is a really easy example because it's an easy enemy to have. It's why for decades in the movies, the go-to enemy was the Nazis, because that's an easy bad guy to not feel bad about going after, right? You can harm as many as you want. That's why it's in all of the Indiana Jones movies. And like in Star Wars, the Empire are the Nazis. It's an easy enemy to have because you can hate them and not feel bad about it. But Jesus says, hey, wait a second. I'm not in the hate business. That's not how I do it. That's not how I work. Now, one of the things that we do when we come across hard teachings is we try to convince ourselves that Jesus was being hyperbolic. That he was making a big illustration to teach something that we can do on a reasonable scale and it'd be okay. We rationalize our responsibilities, would dilute the teachings of Jesus to make them more palatable. We make it look more right side up than it is when he calls us to live upside down. Because Jesus does use metaphor a lot. It's a great teaching tool. Just a moment ago, he talked about plucking your eye out and cutting off your hand if it causes you to sin. Most likely that's metaphorical. That's not even a real word, is it? No, it's not. He was using metaphor. Is it now a real word? Yes, I can use it again. It's metaphorical. Because the truth is that your eye isn't causing you to sin. Your hand isn't causing you to sin. It has no agency of its own, right? My eye has no agency. My hand has no agency. My brain does. Does that mean Jesus wants me to have a lobotomy? No, he wants me to get myself under control. That's why it's so important, because Jesus does use metaphor, that we need to actually do more than just sit and hear his teachings. We must reflect on them, and we must listen to them. We must meditate on them, discuss them with one another so that we can find the truth in their meaning. Yes, Jesus does use hyperbole. He uses parables. He uses metaphors to introduce us to what the will of God is. But which is more likely to be hyperbole? Gouging out an eye and cutting off a hand that's causing you to sin, or praying for someone who is persecuting you? Occam's razor. Which is more likely the hyperbole? Sure, okay, God, I'll pray for them. But I'm going to go to my version of what it means to pray for him. I'll pray for him to meet you quickly. I remember seeing there was something about we don't judge them, we just arrange the meeting. I don't think that that's what it's for. We need to pray for those who are persecuting. Jesus calls us to more. To not be satisfied with our human faults and tendencies, to not be satisfied with the right side up way of the world, but to seek out that upside down and to find joy in that as well. To press on towards righteous perfection. Now, will you be able to reach it? No. Should you stop trying? No. You might not be able to choose if someone is your enemy or not. But you can choose whether or not you treat them like one. Sometimes people choose you as their enemy. I know that there's people in this room right now who are struggling because they have family members who have chosen them as their enemy because of their faith. That actively deride them because of their faith. And that's hard. But we're called to love anyway. To not let the hate that we have, even if it's legitimate, define how we see them, because we choose Jesus' new outlook. One that has a transformative power that's presented through radical love and forgiveness. If you want to chase Christ, it's not an easy road. It's not a complicated course. It's not like you have to memorize a very difficult amount of turns that you need to make to get on the right path. It's a fairly straightforward course, but it's uphill the whole way. It's uncomfortable. It's awkward. It often feels unnatural. But it requires us to readjust what our value is, what our values are, what we rely on, and how we interact with the world. We need to ask ourselves this question: what if Jesus was serious? What if he was serious about loving our enemy? We can't try to mold his teachings to what works in the real world. We can't try to water it down just so it's palatable. But rather, we need to adjust how we interact with the real world so that it molds to the path that Christ set before us. If it's not in line with what we're used to, maybe we need to get used to something else. And it's not easy, but you're not alone. Everyone in this room right here, we're in a different part of that journey. A good percentage of the people in this room have been on this journey, have been on this path for a while. When it comes to laps in the marathon of life, of following Jesus, we've got some people who've been, they've got a good number of laps in. We've got some that are just starting out. So maybe you're on lap 70. Maybe you're on the right path. Maybe you found yourself somehow in like a different street and you don't know how you got there. You went through a barrier that you just didn't notice and you're lost. Guess what? That's why the church is here, so that we can call you back and get you back on the right path. Maybe you are on the right path, and you've been on the right path for a long time. Well, then look around you and find those who are struggling, and let's pull them back into line as we run alongside one another so that we can keep together towards the goal. Wherever you are, I'm glad that you're here today. You're here so that you can find your way back maybe to the path that Jesus marked out. Or maybe you're here today because you are looking out and helping others get on the path to keep in step with Christ's teaching, whatever it might be. I hope that you make today the day that you renew your dedication to this path. The dedication to not just say that you follow Christ, but actually believe he meant what he said. And even though it doesn't make sense, and even though it's uncomfortable, even though it feels wrong, when it comes to the worldly way we understand it, that you will choose to live your life in a way that Jesus meant what he said. So that you might be able to show how different in this world, how much better God's way is to all that you meet. If you need help in that, come find me. I'm sitting up here. If you don't want to talk to me right at, like while we're singing songs, I get it. It's a little weird. It's hard to talk. I can't hear very well. My wife knows that more than anyone else because she'll try to talk to me. The kids are doing something. I'm sorry, I can't hear you right now. We could go and talk in the office. If you don't want to talk to me alone, let's bring as many people into this as possible so that we can work together, because that's why the church is here. But don't let today be another day where you see the path and you walk the other way. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, we thank you so much. We thank you for coming to this earth and setting before us a path to follow. For letting us know the pace that we need to take to keep up with you as we live through our lives. But God, we ask that you forgive us, and we thank you for forgiving us for falling short of that so often. God, give us courage and boldness to continue to press forward even when we find ourselves on the wrong path. Help us to not give up and just keep heading off in a different direction when we know that we should be somewhere else. But give us the courage to seek out help in finding our way back onto the path that you have created, so that we can celebrate the love that you have for us and that others can see it too. It's in your name we pray.